So, with the Matrix franchise back on the map again, I thought that I would take the time to make a video and do something of a Christian retrospective on the franchise, so let's go ahead and get started. So, just a quick warning, there will definitely be some spoilers if you haven't seen any of the Matrix movies before, but here we go anyways. So, looking back, when the first Matrix was released in 1999, it had a very interesting and surprising relationship with Christians. I remember when my mom watched it after having it strongly recommended to her, and in spite of its R rating and our young age, she let me and my brother watch it too. What took Christians off guard were the strong philosophical themes that were interwoven throughout the movie and the strange way in which they could be mapped onto the Christian faith. Human beings in the Matrix were, according to Morpheus, born into bondage. It sounds a lot like original sin. They were freed into a new way of looking at the world, which sounds kind of like being born again. Neo was a savior figure with strong parallels to Christ, his death, and resurrection. Faith was a constant theme in the movie. As I and many others have looked into the authorial intentions of the film's writers and creators, the Wachowskis, it's very clear that they were very intentional about appealing to a variety of philosophical worldviews. It would appear that they were perfectly aware that Christians would be included in those the film would appeal to. However, over time, when we include the rest of the trilogy and look at what seem to be the personal interpretations the Wachowskis intended to include, I think that a much different agenda can be seen throughout the franchise. That's not to say that Christian interpretations were included by accident, but I would argue that these themes had a way of distracting Christians from other themes, both political and philosophical, that were just as intentional and probably even stronger. What many Christians were faced with when engaging with the Matrix franchise years ago was filtering out things like strong language and sexual content in whatever ways they saw fit, like minimizing the attention they paid to it or fast forwarding, like many Christians do with R-rated and mature content. As a result, I think that many of us, while ignoring this content, also managed to overlook the form that much of this content took. What exactly were the lyrics that the Rage Against the Machine song had at the end of the movie? Why exactly do those club and rave sequences include deviation from sexual norms? None of these creative choices were accidental, and watching the included documentaries about these movies and listening to commentaries confirms this over and over again. Where we as Christians are eager to see fictional stories parallel our worldview, The Matrix self-consciously did this, but simultaneously told another story of rebirth and breaking free from bondage. A story that I think is obviously far closer to the hearts of the Wachowskis. If you want to begin to get an idea of this worldview, look up the lyrics to the song Wake Up by Rage Against the Machine. This was the song that played at the end of the first Matrix movie. The lyrics are chock full of how we are being controlled by oppressive systems and government leaders and false ways of thinking. These themes of corrupt government authority and corrupt religious authority are pervasive in Rage Against the Machine's music. At bottom, I think it is clear that The Matrix is a franchise about what is academically called false consciousness. What exactly does that mean? Throughout the history of far left politics, this idea has been embraced through one vocabulary or another. Looking all the way back to figures like Hegel, Marx, Gramsci, and even more recent figures like Herbert Marcuse, the world is seen through the lens of oppressors and oppressed. With Marx, the focus was economic oppression. More recently, those on the extreme left who have pursued civil rights movements in the 20th century have often hijacked bipartisan issues such as racism, and have applied this Marxist lens to it. To draw a contrast with this one specific issue, I, as a conservative, right-leaning Christian, see the solution to racism to be looking beyond skin color to our common humanity, therefore enabling ourselves to then celebrate these secondary differences and characteristics. However, in far-left academic circles, and more in pop culture, it is believed that the solution to remaining racism is to lean into these secondary characteristics, making them of primary importance. It is believed that these categorizations are, in a sense, social constructs used by those in power to oppress. Therefore, the only way to fight back is to emphasize these secondary characteristics in response, but as a means of seizing back that power. The most recent iteration of this way of thinking can be seen in the sexual revolution. Gender norms and roles are seen as socially constructed as well. They're not natural results of our biology, but are placed upon us in order to control us. This in contrast to a traditional Christian perspective that embraces the binary nature of sexuality and more traditional outworkings of it. With this in mind, the Wachowskis' interpretation of their own sexuality and their apparent political leanings should not be surprising at all. So again, what is this idea of false consciousness that I believe The Matrix was and is driving at? It is being blind to these various forms of systemic oppression. Either being blind in the ways in which we oppress others if we are in a privileged group, or being blind to our own oppression if we are in a disadvantaged group. To be awakened to these realities is to have critical consciousness as opposed to false consciousness. This is also known as being woke. This interpretation of The Matrix has been further evidenced in recent months as the Wachowskis have gone so far as to say they were perhaps on some level addressing the trans lifestyle when creating the original Matrix trilogy. I'm personally a bit skeptical, as I know how common it has become for artists to read their current political leanings into previous works. In either case, it is certainly clear that awakening to systemic oppression in society in the strong left-wing, even Marxist sense was very much on the front burner when these movies were originally being produced. This is evident in the books that actors were asked to read while preparing for the movies. It is evident in the way the racial diversity in the film is talked about by those close to the Wachowskis. Not merely the fact that the movies have racial diversity, which is of course an excellent thing, but again, the strong politically left-leaning way that this diversity is talked about. And again, this lens is evident in the strong subversion of gender norms throughout the films. And far from promoting any kind of exclusive truth claims in regard to the embracing of religious faith, these movies definitely seem to promote a far more relativistic and postmodern approach. For instance, while Morpheus had an unswerving faith in Neo as the One in the first movie, in the rest of the trilogy, it's not until he sees this message as another system of control and reevaluates all he believes that his character comes to true fruition. With all of this in mind, the rather rebellious and subversive music we Christians ignored while watching the movies, the, let's say, non-traditional sexual behavior, all of it stops being a bug and becomes a feature of the franchise as a whole. It fits the deepest themes of the work perfectly. So, what's my main point here? I've generally been against the idea of Christians boycotting secular entertainment as a gut reaction, though it is sometimes appropriate. I would still recommend that many Christians watch the films, as they are challenging if approached with discernment, and they can help us think through our worldview in a deeper way. I guess my point is that while Christians should certainly look for parallels to their faith when they can be found in fiction, they should more importantly try to gain an awareness of the authorial intent, or that is, the creator's intent. What was truly intended by the creators of this media, and how does it stand in comparison or contrast to our faith? So, if you choose to go and see The Matrix 4 when it comes out, what are my predictions and what questions should we be asking as we watch? Well, much has changed since 1999 when this franchise first started. Left-wing ideas like the furtherance of the sexual revolution and the various forms of critical consciousness I mentioned are now at full blast. I would not be surprised at all if these political ideas were even more overt than they were before in the franchise. For instance, I'm sure there will be an even greater emphasis on LGBT issues in the film, either through explicit plot points or stronger representation across the board. In the midst of all that, I do hope that there is enough of what made the original films fun included in these movies, things that both left-wing and right-wing people can find enjoyment in. So let me know what you think about the Matrix franchise. Did you enjoy it as many did when it first came out? What are you hoping to see or not see in the fourth movie? Do you have any predictions? If you enjoyed the video, thanks for stopping by. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy yourself. The trailer to the fourth Matrix movie is set to come out very soon, so click right over here if it has come out and I've done my reaction to it. That should be coming up pretty soon. If you like gaming, make sure that you check out the link to my gaming channel in the description, and we will see you around in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.